Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is Harry Brelsford from SMB Nation, and we're coming to you live from where I'm in Phoenix at Ingram Micro Summit Cloud 2017, enjoying a pretty deep dive from the largest distributor of technologies. There's, I think, about 1,600 real attendees, and then another 400 Ingram employees. It's about a 2,000-person show down here at 91 degrees. If you're in Orlando, I will be at the Lenovo Accelerate Conference Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week, so raise your hand and let me know. And then keep your eye on the prize in terms of some upcoming activities from SMB Nation. We're going to be announcing an online seminar series shortly, so keep your eyes peeled to the mailbox. With that said, be sure to use the question feature to answer your questions today as normal, and let's just jump right into it. It's a high honor and pleasure. We have Walter from Pacific Capital Resource Group joining us. So Walter, thanks for joining us, and why don't I hand you the talking stick, my friend?
All right. Thank you for the introduction. I'm excited to be part of this series and excited to speak with some of your folks around the country. By way of introduction, my name is Walter Young. I'm a senior wealth strategist with Pacific Capital Resource Group here in Bellevue and Seattle, Washington. And tonight I thought we would get a couple housekeeping items completed for us too. Before we begin every presentation, we want to make sure that although we may be talking about taxes, we want to make sure everyone knows that we are not accountants or CPAs. We may have some discussions. We want to make sure that folks know that we are not providing any legal advice. And last but not least, keep your wallets in your pockets, because this is not a solicitation. This is purely a conversation, a presentation that we hope will be entertaining and educate you on how retirement income streams work and how we can work towards maximizing retirement income streams. So with that, disclosures out of the way, I thought we would begin. So I want everyone who's on the call to take a quick second and just maybe close their eyes or think about what retirement looks like to them. I always start every meeting with clients or every presentation I do in the speaking series around having some people do a quick reflection of what retirement looks like to them. And I'll also often ask groups of people if they'll actually describe what it looks like to them, and oftentimes people will tell me descriptive terms like they want to be able to do what they want to do, or not have to worry about money, or be able to visit grandchildren, or maybe have a hobby, or maybe able to work part-time. Those are all very common answers to that question. And what's interesting to me is when I ask that question, no one ever tells me a number. No one tells me $5 million or $3 million or $10 million. It's always a qualitative answer. And that's because for most of us, retirement evokes an emotion, right? It's something we've never done before, and it's something that we are dreaming about that we want to accomplish. Well, my background, I worked for Deloitte Consulting and helped work with Fortune 500 companies and did a lot of financial planning for large corporations. And so I have a little bit more of a pragmatic approach in that I look at this as a definition for being financially independent. When I can move from having to earn my income to being able to passively earn my income, I know I've hit financial freedom. Let's see if that makes sense. When I move from earned income to passive income, that's when I know I'm financially free. And in fact, if I can't make that jump, then sadly it might mean that I have to continue to work, maybe even for the rest of my life. So most people, when I sit down with them, this is the goal. We want to be able to get them from where they have to earn their income to where their asset base is able to earn the income for them. One of the other things I think is unique about us is because I have an MBA and work for the consulting world, I oftentimes think of everyone as a business, meaning your household and family can operate like a business. I joke with people that I once had the pleasure of meeting a CFO president for a billion-dollar life insurance company, and I asked him what he was most proud of about his company. And of course, as insurance people do, they'll tell me that he was very proud of his balance sheet, that the company was on the upswing with the strength of their balance sheet, and the ratings agencies were excited about it. And in fact, it was a very impressive balance sheet. But I looked at him and took a chance and took a risk and said, you know, I don't think that is the most important thing about your company. And he looked at me puzzled and wondered why I would be challenging him when his balance sheet was so impressive. And I just started to ask some questions like this. What happens every 2 weeks? And he said, I have to pay my employees. I said, what happens when a policyholder claim comes through. Well, we have to pay out claims. And he began to realize that what I was getting at is that it wasn't necessarily his balance sheet that was most important to him, it was cash flow. And I know that for each one of us, whether you are a real business, as most of you are, or if we can use your family unit and use the analogy of your family being a business, I would argue, and maybe you agree with me, that cash flow is probably the single most important thing that runs through your business. I've yet to see someone be able to go to Safeway with a large 401k statement and buy anything. Try buying milk with an account statement. It doesn't work. We have to be able to transition. We have to be able to turn that cash, that balance sheet, into cash flow so we can actually use it. And as I start all my conversations with clients and seminars, I ask the following question. If you are a business, would you invest in you? And most people chuckle when I say that because it's kind of an interesting question. We never think of ourselves in that way. If I was a business, would other people invest in me? Would you brag to your friends that they should be investing in you? Or do we secretly, as many of us do, think about maybe there's some areas of opportunity for betterment of our situation, or maybe we just know that we're being challenged right now and that we need to work towards improving our cash flow now and in the future. So I want to kind of take this framework going forward to talk about retirement income streams. I want you to think of yourself as a business. I want to think about the goal being that we want to maximize our cash flow now and at retirement so that we can move from having to be in an earned income environment to one where we can be in a passive investment or a passive income environment. So we have to always think about beginning with the end in mind, right? Stephen Covey told us the best planning is when we begin with the end in mind, and financial planning is no different, right? The idea is to have safe, predictable, and more cash flow in retirement. Why do we discuss this now? Well, the sooner you understand how retirement income streams work, the sooner we can adopt the correct strategies. And the sooner that we can adopt the right strategies, the greater impact on the results. Some of you are just beginning your careers, some of you may be more advanced in your careers, and we want to begin to understand that retirement income streams is something we need to plan for as soon as possible. And that is what we'll finish and continue the rest of the conversation discussing. So for the balance of our conversation, let's use a simple analogy. Let's assume that our financial journey is like climbing a financial mountain. I'll often ask people why people climb Mount Everest. And invariably, people will tell me because they want to get to the top. That is the goal. And I've had a few occasions to speak with folks who have summited Mount Everest, and I'll ask them the same question, and they will certainly tell me that it's the physical challenge and the logistics and all the things that go into climbing the financial mountain, and indeed the goal is to get to the top. But if I ask that person's spouse or family members what their goal is for climbing Mount Everest, I will always hear is to get back home safely. And in financial planning, that is exactly the same. Getting to the financial top of our journey is only half the journey. We still have to somehow come back down. And in fact, if we continue the mountain climbing analogy, most people die coming down Mount Everest, not climbing it. Perhaps it's a different kind of skill set. Perhaps we need different equipment. Maybe we're just a little bit more tired. But coming down the Mount Everest is a much trickier prospect than going up. In fact, think about other examples of coming down things. Think about cleaning the gutters, the leaves off our gutters, and climbing up a ladder onto our roofs. Isn't it just a little bit more nerve-wracking taking that first step down onto the ladder than going up? And isn't it funny that cats climb up trees but can never climb down trees? There's something about climbing down that just makes us a little more nervous. It maybe takes a little bit more time. And in fact, our financial planning world is no different. We are well versed in terms of accumulation strategies, right? The pre-retirement strategies. Many of us know how to take advantage of 401ks or other retirement plans. Many of us know or have heard of dollar cost averaging, where we put small amounts of money into investments over time to take advantage of volatility. But we don't always understand is what the rules that help us climb up our financial mountains in fact change 180 degrees when it's time to come down. The same strategies that helped us climb and get our asset bases that are ready for us to use when we retire actually are now the opposite. And that's what we'll finish with the discussion about. The accumulation, let's focus on that for the rest of the presentation. Here's this case study that we'll use. And for some of you, this may be a lot of money. For some of you, maybe a small amount of money. But let's use this case study partially because of the round numbers. Let's assume at retirement, we do a good job and save $1 million into our investments, 401ks, or whatever it is that we're using. And let's assume we have a 30-year time period for retirement. And let's also assume that we would love to have a $100,000 cash flow or income that comes from that nest egg. That then would mean that we have to have a withdrawal rate of 10%, right? If we take our $100,000 and divide it into the million, that tells us that we need a 10% withdrawal rate, meaning we're taking 10% out of that nest egg every year for the cash flow. Withdrawal rate may be a new term for some of you. This is not the percent rate that your portfolio will grow over time. It is the percent that I'm going to be taking out of the retirement. And so now we're going to test the theory and see how successful we can be. If we have $1 million, we want a $100,000 income, taking 10% out each year. Well, here's a chart of a 30-year period where the markets averaged 14.89%. Right? You can see that if that was the case, it'd be a very simple financial plan. We could put our $1 million in, and in year one we earned 14.89%. I pull out my $100,000 for living, and in fact my balance grew. And as you can see, each year, because I'm taking out only 10% and I'm earning 14.89%, at the end of 30 years, I've taken out my $100,000, and I get to leave my children or my heirs $15 million. And this is an example that we see oftentimes with rough calculators that might be on the internet or our mutual fund sites, where we throw in a number, a rate of return number, and then we assume a number that we'll take out, and oftentimes we'll get a calculator that looks like this. Now, a lot of you are sitting there going, wait a minute, something doesn't look quite right about this chart. There's two things that people usually contest about this chart. The first one is, am I ever going to earn 14.89%? Well, we can certainly argue whether those times are still to come or if they're in the past. But the second part is more important. Take a look at the yield. You can see that this yield, 14.89%, is the same number every year for 30 years. And we know that that's not how the markets really work. We know that the markets are up and down each year. They're positive or negative, and they're usually different numbers. And so we know that this yield is not reflective of how the markets really work. In fact, this is really what happened from 1970 to 1999. Yes, in fact, if we add up all these numbers and divide by 30, we will get 14.89%. But notice, each year is different, and we have 5 negative years during that 30-year period. It was a phenomenal 30-year period where we had superior returns. And if I change these numbers up and scramble them and divide by 30, I will always get 14.89%. We know that to be true. However, averages can be very misleading. I often joke with clients that if I put my foot in a bucket of water where one foot was in 0-degree temperature and one was in 200-degree temperature, on average I should be very comfortable. But in reality, I'm going to have 2 very uncomfortable feet. And so we want to be very careful when we use averages going forward into retirement, that they can be misleading even if they are mathematically accurate. Let's take a look at that in an example. If we take that same return sequence that we saw here from 1970 to 1909 and overlay it in this chart, we can see a very different result. Yes, at the very beginning we have our $1 million, and since it costs money to live indoors, I have to take money out to live on. And so if I want to live on that $100,000, you can see over the first 3 years of retirement, I'm okay. I had some nice returns, and in fact, my $1 million is still $1 million at year 3. But lo and behold, years 4 and 5, something happens. The markets are negative. We've seen plenty of examples that that's possible in the past, and we know that it's very possible in the future. And so we have these declines. And because we want to live indoors, we still need to take out our money. We take out our $100,000. And as it does frequently when those markets are negative, sometimes we have tremendous rebounds. But the problem is that those rebounds are no longer acting on the original balance. If you can see here, this 37% is only acting on $500,000. And so although it's a very large percentage increase, it doesn't get us back to our original balance. And forevermore, where you can see that we're beginning to lose money even though most of the time we have positive returns. This is a phenomenon known as reverse dollar cost averaging, or asset erosion. It is the exact opposite of what happens when we're climbing our financial mountains. When we're in working mode, we don't mind if the markets are negative from time to time, because oftentimes that means we might buy more shares or pick up some investments on the cheap. But when we're coming down our financial mountain, this is the death spiral. This is what crashes us on our financial mountains. And you can see at the end of this table, we do not have $15 million for our grandchildren. In fact, we owe them $10 million. So all we did was input the real numbers of what happens in the markets, not an average of 14.89%. And that sequence of returns that you see here allowed us to run out of money in years 13 as opposed to making it through 30 years. And the one thing we know about the markets is we never know what the sequence of returns are going to be. That is known as sequence of return risk, meaning I don't know what return I'll get next year or the following years or into retirement. I know there'll be always different numbers, but I just don't know. Will I have negative years up front, or will I have negative years towards the end of my retirement? And the impact will be dramatic. If I change these numbers, I will have different numbers every time in my balance. So we can see clearly here that 10% was too much of a withdrawal rate. Many of you may have known that from the beginning, but we wanted to prove to you that a 10% withdrawal rate from that $1 million proves to be too much, because there will be from time to time negative markets. So let's stop for a second and ask our first poll question and see what responses we get.
That poll question is launched, and it looks like people are responding. We'll give it here another minute, and we'll read those answers.
Fantastic.
And we're back to you, Walter.
Okay, how did the poll questions come out?
Yep. We have 5% of, or excuse me, 67% of people said 5%, 17% of people said 4%, and 17% of people said 3%. So our majority says 5% is what economists now say is a safe withdrawal rate in retirement.
Fantastic. That's very common, and so let's go ahead and continue our conversation and see how that plays out. So as we saw on the last slide, 10% clearly was too much money. We ran out of money in 13 years. And so that prompted the study to figure out what is a sustainable rate where I can take out money from a portfolio and have it last over a 30-year period of time. And that is what's become known as the 4% rule, or the safe withdrawal rate rule. And back in the 80s when that study was done, 4% was the fairly agreed upon amount that economists agreed that's sustainable over a period of time. In today's rate, economists are stating that it is 2.8 to 3%, simply because interest rates, of course, were a lot lower than they were back in the 80s. Lots and lots of articles and things have been written about what is a sustainable safe withdrawal rate. But we do know now that the withdrawal rate is much lower than it was in the 4%. What this means is that I have to have a lot of assets in order for that 2 or 3% to be able to give me the retirement I want. Here's the original illustration that came out back in the 80s. The way to read this is, on the left is the probability of keeping a positive portfolio, which means $1. Not the original amount of money I start with at retirement, but $1. On the bottom axis, we see the years into retirement. You can see that the longer our retirement goes, the more strain there is on our asset base because, of course, inflation and erosion and taxes and consumption is happening as we retire. And on the right is the punchline. You can see the different rates of withdrawal and their success. For example, look at 6, 7, and 8. Virtually very small percent probability of success if that is your withdrawal rate. Even at 5% would suggest that a 50% chance of running out of money exists. Even at 4%, we can see that there's still a 20% chance that we could run out of money. I joke with clients and seminar participants that if I'm on my way to spring break, I'm going to Hawaii and the airline pilot gets on the phone and says, "Welcome aboard, we're excited to have you. Our flying time is 5 hours and 50 minutes and we have an 80% chance of making it," that most of us won't get on that plane. But funny thing is that for many of us, that is what we're doing with our retirement portfolios. We are leaving the chance that we could run out of money because we don't always understand how retirement income streams work. So for the rest of the presentation, we're going to examine how that safe withdrawal rate can be improved so that we can have the lifestyle we're hoping for when we get to retirement. Let's go back to what the conclusion of what we've just learned, which is if I have $1 million, the safe withdrawal rate would suggest that we can only take out 3 to 4% of our portfolio balance each and every year for 30 years. That means I may have worked 30, 40 years and done a great job of savings to get to that $1 million, but I might only be living on $30,000 to $40,000. For many of us, that's not the lifestyle we were hoping for. We were hoping that maybe we could live on a larger amount because $1 million seems like a lot of money. And so the rest of the presentation is how can we look to improve upon that. But before we get there, we're going to take a little bit of a detour and learn some more nomenclature. There are typically two kinds of retirement plans that exist. One is called a defined contribution. You know that as your 401ks or 403bs or IRA plans. The other side is the defined benefits. Some of you may know that. Maybe you have a spouse or a family that have pensions. I know in the Northwest, Boeing is a very large example of a company that has been paying out pensions for a number of years. The trend of these two kinds of retirement plans are very different. The trend of the defined contribution is growing, meaning there are more and more 401k plans are being put in place. And as you may know, the defined benefit plan or the pension plans are shrinking. We know that with a pension, there is a guarantee as long as the company's in business, whereas the 401k plan, there is no guarantees. Many of us joke that back in 2008, our 401k turned into a 201k. In terms of risk, we know that we take the risk with a 401k, and the employer takes the risk with pensions. And the strategy itself, let's take a look at what the strategy is itself. In a pension, if we break apart a pension into its two most element forms, we have an interest rate or an investment portfolio component, and this other component called actuarial science. For many of us, actuarial science might be a new term. What does actuarial science mean? Actuaries are a group of people who study the life expectancy of a group of people. So imagine if we use Boeing as an example, that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of retired Boeing employees. And the actuaries are trying to determine how long will the average employee live so they can tell their investment department how to invest that money so that their portfolio or their pension amount can be given out to that employee for as long as they live. Let's just use for an example that maybe they determine that the average employee is going to live to be age 83. They will then make their investments so that they can make sure that they can cover a pension payment to that person who turns 83. Now we all know some people will live beyond age 83. And so we know that the way that they are compensated is because some of the people, unfortunately, will not even make it to age 83. So those that live longer are subsidized by the people that die sooner. And that is known as mortality credit or actuarial science. It is a way that we can make sure that we are accurate with the payments for people who are in pensions. Let's turn our attention now to the defined contribution. Notice that it also has an interest rate of return, right? We know that our 401ks and 403bs have investments. But what's missing? Well, in order to make it feel like a pension, it's missing actuarial science. And when I sit down with clients, typically we sit around a kitchen table in my office, and we recognize that it's hard to use actuarial science when the pool of people is 1 or 2 people. We can be wildly inaccurate as to how long 1 or 2 people might live. And so we must assume that we have to plan for them to live to be 95 or 100. Well, as you can imagine, that means they have to take out small amounts of money compared to someone who might only live to be age 83. And so when we do the financial planning, we start to think about, can we borrow actuarial science so that we can have a higher payment in retirement, as opposed to having to make sure our payments can make it all the way through age 95 or 100. Let's take a look at an example of this. Let's assume that we're going back to our mountain climb and that we want to get up our financial mountain. And so we think that we might need some sort of propellant energy to climb us up our financial mountain. Let's call that hydrogen. Hydrogen might be a wonderful gas that pushes up our financial mountain. The problem with hydrogen is if I light it on fire, it's explosive. We know that this is the case. Let's assume we get to the top of our financial mountain and we're exhausted. Well, oftentimes we might want to have some oxygen. But we know that if we light oxygen on fire, it also might be explosive. But if we mix them in just the right way, we get water, the very antithesis of an explosion. Now, hydrogen, oftentimes we compare that to the markets. We know that the markets are a fantastic growth tool, but from time to time, they can have some spectacular crashes. 2008 just being the most recent example, and we could probably all agree that we'll see more in the future. We just don't know when. The oxygen world is actuarial science. It's the insurance world. We know that although it's not as good a growth tool as the markets, it's a much better distribution tool. And so ideally, we would love to have the mix. We would love to have the market's growth, but the insurance's distribution. Let's take a look at why that would work. Recall this chart that we had? Remember how we put the real results into our chart here. We know that we were out of money by age 13. And so now let's go ahead and see what happens if we add some oxygen to a primarily hydrogen-based solution. If during these 5 years when the markets were negative, we could, rather than sell in the down markets, if we could instead have another tank of money called oxygen, if we could pull our $100,000 from that side of the tank instead, notice what happens to our account value at the bottom. Rather than being $10 million short of money, we have almost $3 million. And what was the distribution or withdrawal rate that we used? You remember? It was 10%. Recall in the previous slide that 10% didn't even come close to working. And now suddenly a 10% withdrawal rate might just get us through. Let's now take a quick break and do our second poll question, please.
All right, we just launched that poll question. At retirement, would you rather have $1 million in 401k or 40,000 annual pension? So we'll give it just a minute and let people vote here.
Great. Let me know when you get the results.
All right, we're going to close those polls and let me share them. So we had 75% of our audience say that they would like an annual pension, and 25% of the audience say that they'd like the 401k option.
Interesting. So in this group, we were more biased towards the pension. That changes from time to time as I speak to different groups of people. Some people are more investment focused and other people are more pension focused. But let's take a look at how this relates. If you remember what we talked about, if we had a nest egg of $1 million and we were using only a hydrogen strategy, meaning that our money was just in the markets with 401ks and didn't have any of the oxygen, our distribution rate was 3 to 4%. Notice that at $1 million and a 4% distribution rate, I can take out $40,000. So in fact, that poll question was a little bit of a trick question in that $1 million at retirement or a $40,000 pension are virtually the same distribution or income amount. And so we wanted people to understand that sometimes $1 million seems like a lot of money, but it may only kick out $40,000. And a $40,000 pension really is the equivalent of having $1 million in an account somewhere paying you 4%. But what we want our clients to understand is that as we add our oxygen to the equation, we move away from the 3 to 4% distribution rule into the land where we can now enjoy 7 to 13% distributions. Why is this important? Well, with the same $1 million, look at the difference in potential income. Rather than having to live on $30,000 to $40,000, we might have the opportunity to live on $70,000 to $130,000 with the same asset base. You see, we could have the same asset base, but it's the efficiency of distribution that will determine our future lifestyle. If we are only hydrogen-based, we will be limited to how much we can take out because of the volatility in the markets. We just never know when that next downturn is going to come, and therefore we must be conservative. As we add more certainty, more pension-like qualities to our retirement plan, we can now begin to enjoy a 7 to 13% retirement distribution rate. And that can oftentimes mean the difference between writing our grandkids Christmas cards or going to visit them. For our clients, what we like to do is show them the path that they're on, and then what are their choices to improve the retirement income streams so that they can enjoy more income rather than just a big balance sheet. Go back to my conversation with the president of this insurance company and think about how this relates. He was very proud of his $1 million balance sheet or his $1 billion balance sheet. But if it doesn't kick out the cash flow, it's not nearly as impressive as someone maybe with a smaller balance sheet that does kick out the cash flow. And if we think about you as a business, retirement is all about cash flow, not necessarily just how much money you have. We want to be able to generate as much income safely and predictably as we can when we get into retirement incomes. So what are we looking to do for folks who are on the call today? It would be our pleasure to run the analysis that we run for all of our clients to show you how you might benefit from increasing retirement income streams through these strategies. Here's a sample output of what you might expect. This salmon color over here is typically what we see for people who are using only 401ks or only investments. We call this the retirement asset only solution. That's where we have that 3 to 4% hydrogen strategy. And on the right, you can see how we begin to add different strategies that use oxygen. And by combining the hydrogen and oxygen, you can see the difference in income going from maybe a $30,000, $40,000 distribution to maybe an $80,000 or $90,000 distribution. What does that mean? It might mean for some of us, we will see a very significant jump in your retirement income streams. It is not uncommon for us to see people with 30, 40, 50, and even 100% improvement in income streams simply because they begin to understand how to combine the hydrogen and oxygen elements of the financial markets. And what we're thrilled to do with Harry today is to offer anyone who has an interest in this a no obligation free report on how their retirement income streams are going to play out as they are now, and then compare those to the benefit that might be provided with the strategies and solutions we offer our clients. And so with that, I'd like to close the conversation and open it up to questions and comments. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. Let's see. I have a couple of questions on my screen to the left. How do I get my analysis run to find out how prepared I am for retirement?
That's a fantastic question. I've put on the screen here my phone number, which is 206-683-3375, and an email, which is wyoung@pcrg.com. Simply call me or send me an email letting me know that you were on this discussion, this webinar, and we will make sure that we get the report out to you. We will need maybe 6 to 8 pieces of information, very high-level information that you probably know at the tip of your fingers, and we would be thrilled to show the improvement that oftentimes comes with combining hydrogen and oxygen.
Sounds like maybe we lost Harry again.
Sorry,
Oh,
Jenny.
there you are.
Sorry, I warned you earlier. I'm having phonophobia today. I'm back. Boy, I was talking to myself too. I read the question. Okay, here we go. Help me understand how your analysis works. How long does it take, and what information do I need to provide you?
Great question. So generally, the analysis, the first step is we will ask about 8 to 10 different questions to get a sense for what retirement accounts you have and account balances and investment accounts and your contributions to these accounts. And then we will be able to take that information and show you what your projected path is in the hydrogen world. Then we'll begin to show you some solutions that will utilize the oxygen world, and we will take a look at how your retirement income streams will improve. And then that will give us a sense of how to guide you into positioning yourself so that you have the right strategy when you get to retirement. It should not take more than half an hour on a phone call for us to be able to get that information, and maybe 2 or 3 days later we'll be able to have the report ready to review with you.
Perfect. Let's see. Hey, well, folks, this is a great opportunity to ask the questions you would like. Just to once again to remind you that use the questions feature to do that. And while we're doing that, FYI, if by chance you're at the Ingram Micro Cloud Summit in Phoenix, I'm here. I speak at 3:40 this afternoon. Next week, I'm in Orlando at Lenovo Accelerate. So if you're going to that conference or in the neighborhood, stop by. Love to get together with you. Keep your eye peeled for, of course, more upcoming webinars and a conference series, an online conference series. Going to be announcing. Jenny, I'll put that on you. Do you think we'll be ready to launch in the next couple of days? I know you're working hard on that, but we don't launch till we're ready.
I'm hoping to be all ready, hopefully by this weekend.
Okay. No, that's fantastic. Jenny, help me if I'm not seeing the right screen. I think we may have cleared the deck on the questions. What's it look like in the control room?
It looks like we've cleared the deck unless we have any more that come in, but I'm not seeing any more coming in.
Sure. So Walter, maybe this is a chance to give it your best shot.
Well, I want to first thank you for the opportunity, and I think it's very important that people begin to understand that in order to have the retirement income that you want, you have to understand what tools and strategies you need to have in place today, so when you get there, they're ready to go. If we use the mountain climbing analogy, when I'm at the top of my financial mountain or the top of Mount Everest, I better not learn I needed a different kind of rope to get back down, because I don't get to start from the beginning to get it. So I'm excited to be able to answer any questions or review the analysis with you, and I would be excited to help you with the journey of financial analysis.
All righty. Well, thanks for dropping by to visit. Folks, you're going to receive a thank you email within 24 hours from us with some updates and some links, and we'll look forward to you clicking through and participating in that. And once again, thanks for joining us on the weekly webinar at SMB Nation. It sounds like, Jenny, if you're good, I'm good. We'll see these fine folks down the road.
Sounds good, everyone. Have a fantastic day.